I'm going to talk to you today about the White River. In 1992, the American Fisheries Society asked me to do a case history of the White River for a big rivers symposium at their national meeting. I was given the White River, another of our biologists did the Arkansas, and there's other folks from other states did other rivers. I got the White. White River is 720 miles long. It starts upstream from Fayetteville, Arkansas, goes into Missouri, then back into Arkansas, and reaches the Mississippi River south of Helena. The basin is almost 28,000 square miles, and the vast majority of it is in Arkansas. The rest of it is in Missouri. It's the main drainage of the southern Ozarks. The White River Basin has 176 native species of fish, plus another 20 plus that we have introduced from elsewhere. 58 species of mussels, and 28 species of crayfish. 17 fish, at least, are endemic to the White River Basin. That means they're found nowhere else in the world except in the White River Basin. Most of them are minnows and darters from headwater streams. The fish pictured is a dusky striped shiner, one of the most common minnows we have in this territory. They color up real nice in breeding season. Most of the fish that's on the endemic list are headwater stream fish. They live in the headwaters, but they can't survive downstream, so they don't ever get to other headwaters, so they evolve separately. This being a good example, this is the current darter. It is one of a group they call the orange throat darters. This one lives in the Current, Spring, and Level Point River. Another, even more limited distribution, brook darter, doesn't even reach Arkansas. It's in Missouri, in the Black River above Poplar Bluff. It's the only place in the world it's found, real limited distribution. A lot of the fish are mad toms. Mad toms are tiny catfish. The checkered mad tom pictured is the biggest of the bunch. It may make 5 inches occasionally. It's dangerous animals. If you've ever been stung by a young bullhead, multiply by 3 and you have a mad tom. I saw a graduate student puke when he got stung by a mad tom. So don't handle it. 3 species of mad toms, likely a 4th, the slender mad tom. The ones in the White River look a lot different than anywhere else in the world, so it's likely to be split out to its own species. Mussels. A couple of species are endemic to and a couple of subspecies are endemic. Mussels are real interesting. That flap you see in front of that mussel, that's part of his mantle. It's not a fish. Mussels, baby mussels, are fish parasites. So the smallmouth bass comes along and he grabs what he thinks is a darter, but what he gets is a mouthful of baby mussels. They live on his gills until they drop out and set up. Another thing that's interesting about mussels is some of them have a single fish host, can't attach to anybody else. And I'll mention how that works in a little bit. 7 crawfish are endemic to the White River Basin, including the nation's biggest crawfish. The long-pincered crawfish is like a small lobster. We have them in Crooked Creek, Buffalo River. Table Rock Lake is so full of them that folks, divers, go and have a big crawdad broiled with them. 75% of the White River Basin is in the Ozarks. It originates in the Boston Mountains, which is different than most of the Ozarks. It's shale and sandstone rather than limestone and dolomite, which means Boston Mountains have soft water instead of hard water. And that means they have a different fish population than other parts of the Ozarks. A lot of bedrock, a lot of boulders. If it rains, they go up quickly and down quickly. You get farther downstream and you get to the Springfield and Salem plateaus, which we're more familiar with probably. Lower gradient stream, gravel, cobble shoals separated by deep pools. A lot of caverns, underground streams feed these creeks and rivers. A lot of the rivers are disappearing streams. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to motor or tried to canoe from Woolham downstream in the summer on the Buffalo. Don't do it. You'll get about a mile downstream and have to turn around and go back to your truck because the creek disappears right out from under you. Crooked Creek does the same thing right at Yellville. You'll notice that the pool at Yellville is empty some of the time. There may be water flowing in the top of the pool and nothing flowing out of it. It goes underground and comes out goes under the White River and comes up as Cotter Spring. The plateaus are noted for their steep limestone bluffs, scenery. The king of the Ozark fisheries is smallmouth bass. This has always been one of the most common fish up in the Ozarks and the one folks go out to go fishing for. Our streams are full of them. White River used to be full of them. Other fish that you might catch in the Ozark stream, channel catfish, walleye, Ozark bass. This is one of our endemic species. This is our only endemic game fish. They've split rock bass into 3 species, and the very upper part of the White River Basin has Ozark bass. The rest of the basin has a different species of rock bass called shadow bass. Spring River, Current River, 11 Point. That's not the Ozark bass over there. They look quite a bit different. Well, the Ozarks is where float fishing originated. The Ozarks in the 1920s and earlier, they were the Ozarks you saw on the Beverly Hillbillies, Shepherd of the Hills. Isolated, uneducated, poor transportation, totally self-sufficient, still spoke Shakespearean English that they came over with. Well, tourism is what started breaking that down. In the 1920s, 30s, Jim Owen up at Branson had a fishing lodge, and he would take float trips starting at Branson, going several days camping on the gravel bars, and coming out at Batesville and then catch a train to go back to Branson. This opened up the Ozarks to the general public. Changed everything. They might catch 100 smallmouth bass in a trip. I've seen stringers of these folks that they came out with. And it's amazing how many 4-pound smallmouth bass you could catch on the White River back then. Well, a quarter of the basin is in the Delta. You folks aren't as familiar with but up here, the White River is not what we call a big river. It's just the biggest and originally the best of the Ozark streams. It had gravel shoals and deep pools, but you get to Newport, Batesville, and the White River turns into what we call a big river. The fish population is quite different down there. The river is different. in this flat sediments. The river whips across its bottomlands like a garden hose, fire hose, whipping back and forth. Sometimes the two loops will meet each other, like right in the middle of the picture, and the river will cut off a section, leaving behind an Oxbow Lake. The White River in the lower White River Basin, the White River Refuge, has about 300 Oxbow Lakes on it, which used to be White River Channel. The Oxbow Lakes are probably the best fishing in Arkansas. Crappie, largemouth bass, things that are not native to the Ozarks, by the way. Tremendous fish populations in those bottomland lakes. The river has what we have a big river fish population. Instead of smallmouth bass, it's got spotted bass. It's full of blue catfish, which don't come up past Batesville. Sturgeon, paddlefish, blue suckers. Instead of red horse suckers like we have up here, it's got buffalo. The darters and minnows are different species. Big River will have more species because it still has individuals from upstream, but the upstream doesn't have a lot of these species. This, by the way, was one of 6 world records I've seen in my life. It's not anymore, it's been beat repeatedly. It's a blue catfish. 118-pound blue catfish. White River was the best alligator gar fishery. Back in the 1950s, fishing guides down in the Delta region of the White River could get $200 a day for a fishing trip on the White River. In 5 years, they wiped them out, including their $200 a day trips. They thought they were doing the environment a favor, getting rid of alligator gar. They'd leave them on the gravel bar, on the sandbars to rot. They would carry them to the landing, and black folks would haul them home for food. But they intended to wipe them out. The lower river was real important for commercial fishing. In one 16-month period from Clarendon, they shipped on trains 20,000 tons of fish to the eastern markets. Buffalo, catfish, paddlefish were real important. It was also where the mussel industry started. I don't know if any of you have heard about the Great Arkansas Gold Rush. Around the turn of the century, the last turn of the century, folks found that you could earn big bucks by going up to the Black River, crack open mussels that you dig out with your feet, and get pearls. And it was such a big gold rush that folks couldn't keep folks employed in the stores and on the farms. It was really kind of a disaster to Arkansas because the folks couldn't get employees for quite a while. Well, they got so much shell from all of that, eventually they came up with a great idea. Button factories started making buttons out of the shell, and then the mussel industry changed from pearls to pearls being a sideline of the button industry. There was a button factory in Cotter, in Calico Rock, I believe. Or maybe in Cotter, I can't remember, one of the two. Well, the White River was the second most important river in the nation. The Black River was number 4, and between the two of them, the White River Basin was the top mussel industry area in the world, or in the U.S. I think they had about 10,000 tons a year in 1912, almost 10,000. 10,000 tons a year. 10,000 tons a year in 1912. 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 10,0 Well, when we got here, even before we got here, the Native Americans, they had their farms, so they probably increased turbidity in the rivers a little bit. But when white folks got to the Ozarks, started some major land clearing, especially in the bottoms, but also up on the hills, produced cotton and corn, poor agriculture area. Big bucks was not in the farm goods, but in the moonshine that the corn and the potatoes produced. You couldn't make a living on Ozark land. But sediment from farming, that's the #1 pollutant in the U.S., still is, was and is. The loss of woody habitat, higher temperatures, big problems, as well as sedimentation during fish nests and fish food. When you clear the bank, you increase erosion. And folks like to farm all the way to the edge. In small streams, when you cut down the trees, it really increases the temperature. Turn that smallmouth bass creek into a green sunfish creek. The bottom starts growing algae because of the sunlight. So the fish population changes. You got stone rollers eating the algae instead of other minnows eating the invertebrates that fed on decaying leaves in the natural streams. Big change. In the lakes and bottomlands, turbid lakes don't have many bass. They do have a lot of crappie, but they tend to be pretty small, tend to be white crappie. In the clear, wooded lakes, you got good bass populations, large crappie, a lot of black crappie if it's so vegetated. Well, sedimentation is considered the cause of the 3 extinctions, or at least 2 extinctions, that have occurred in the White River Basin. The hairlip sucker is extinct throughout its range. They think that it would fed on, they know it fed on the sowbucks. The sedimentation got rid of the sowbucks. Well, in the 1870s, we started really changing things. The first thing was fairly minor. The precursor to the Corps of Engineers conducted snagging and dragging operations on the White River so that it could be navigated as far up as they could navigate. That got rid of a lot of woody habitat. That's your flathead catfish habitat, for example, your bass cover. But in the 1830s, they started a navigation project. They were going to have locks and dams go from Batesville to, which was navigable all the way to Batesville all the time, and but only part of the time above there. So they're going to have locks and dams go all the way to Branson. And then they built the railroad after they built 3 of these locks and dams. So they didn't complete the project. But these dams do block fish migration. In all my work, I never shocked up a buffalo above Batesville. I have shocked up American eels. So some fish do get over these dams, but they don't affect the flow. They don't affect the flooding. They don't affect the temperature. So they were fairly minor problem on the river as far as the fish population. A little more pool habitat, seem to have more bass and crappie down there, but not significantly. Well, in 1913, go ahead.
How much did the ducks pay into the rivers? And because you were talking about the oxbows and stuff, and I fished those oxbows before, and they're good, but the duck hunting had to take some of that, you know, like with Big Lake, but
sure.
When New Madrid had their earthquake and it filled up all the oxbows and stuff, some of them was in Arkansas. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering how much did they play a part in the rivers?
Always in fertility. Mm-hmm. Well, in 1913, they built Lake Taneycomo. And Lake Taneycomo is a lot more effective at blocking fish migration up above Branson than those locks and dams. I doubt that there's hardly, this is when Bull Shoals was at its very highest level, there's still that much water going over Taneycomo Dam. But Lake Taneycomo didn't change the temperature. It doesn't store water. It doesn't affect flooding downstream at all. But in the 1940s, we started destroying the natural river. We built 5 multi-purpose reservoirs, Norfolk being the first, that impound 170,000 acres. These block all upstream fish migration, but more importantly, they alter the flow. That's what they're built for, is to reduce flooding. Well, flooding is when you get your fish spawns. So they affect the fish population that way. Low summer water temperatures. The water comes off below the thermocline on these dams and makes the water cold. The natural, once they built Bull Shoals Dam, the natural fishery on the White River was destroyed. The float trips ended. And smallmouth bass, walleye, channel catfish. One of my first fishing trips I remember was below the Lake Taneycomo fishing for channel catfish. That was just before they built Table Rock. Good catfish fishing. But within just months, fishing was gone after they built these dams. Float trips were totally ended. Temporarily, the natural White River that was destroyed could never have supported the amount of recreation, the amount of use that the lakes and rivers get now. Just couldn't have. We imported species that were not native to the Ozarks to take advantage of the new habitat. Largemouth bass, crappie, fish that were native to Arkansas but were not in our Ozark streams at the time until we started building ponds. Walleye, channel catfish, good lake fisheries. Lake recreation in 1991, when I did this, was estimated to be almost $100 million. The trout fishery, one of my predecessors, Bob Baker, some of you may have known him, had the bright idea. If we've turned the White River too dang cold for our native fish, let's stop trout. So now the White River is the finest tail race trout fishery anywhere in the U.S. Amen. Its value is over $200 million industry. Well, these reservoirs had a lot more effect than just on the fishery. Would the billion-dollar music industry be in Branson were it not for Table Rock Lake and Taneycomo Lake? No, it would not. It was there because the tourism industry had already started. Those float trips that had ended had restarted by then. The lake fisheries. So we had the entertainment industry moved to Branson. A lot of things that have absolutely nothing to do with fishing. You know, boat manufacturing plants understand. The Baxter Labs would epoxy be in Mountain Home were it not for the lakes? No, some CEO happened to like it here. Well, the Arkansas economy in the Ozarks is the best economy in the state. We are the wealthiest area of the state, and it's because of the reservoirs. We did destroy the natural river, but we got a lot out of it. But by building up the Ozarks, it also has its problems. You need to build roads. To build roads, you need gravel. One of the very easiest place to get gravel is the bottom of our streams. This is on Crooked Creek, by the way. Well, regulations have helped the situation considerably in gravel mining, but gravel mining has two effects. It's logical. You dig a hole, turbidity, the sediment goes downstream, buries the fish food, buries the fish eggs. So yeah, but the big effect of gravel mining is upstream. When you dig a hole in the river, what you're doing is you're changing the slope from that spot to anywhere upstream. Change the slope, increase the slope, you increase the velocity of the water. You increase the velocity, you increase erosion. So what the river does, it fills that hole back in at the expense of your upstream neighbor who lost a chunk of his bank. So we've made some law changes and improved the situation on that. Head cutting, there's places in the West where with soft sediments, where head cutting like that I've described has moved upstream over 100 miles. You dig that hole and may have a 10-foot waterfall. 100 miles upstream, 20 years later, you've got a 5-foot waterfall, which keeps working its way up. We're also a real important area for poultry industry and other animal industry. These Ozark Hills ain't worth a flip for row crops. But you can grow cattle and you can grow poultry and use that to fertilize your cattle fields. To put in perspective what we do, if all the cattle and poultry litter that is put on the ground to produce more cattle, if that all went through a sewage system, this would be the equivalent of a population of 100 million people up here. Luckily, most of it doesn't get in the water, but enough of it does that our streams get a lot of algae. Well, the changes in the delta are even more extreme. 90% of the land down there, probably a lot more than that, has been cleared for agriculture. Excellent farmland. And if it's been cleared for agriculture, it's been channelized to get rid of the water. This creek probably used to have a series of beaver dam lakes on it, full of bass and crappie. Now it's a 6-inch deep channel. The numbers, we did a study one time, sampled 2 adjacent streams in the same Langille River watershed. And the channelized stream had half as many species. It had 1/3 of the biomass, and that, which is the weight per acre. And that's not even accounting for the loss of the acreage because of the channelization. Game fish are essentially wiped out. The number of fish per pound means that this creek is just full of minnows. Nothing else. A lot of other things happening down there. Navigation bridge. Built a lock and dam at the mouth, Montgomery Point Lock and Dam, to get navigation into the White River. Dredging of the river for navigation. Cool water extends all the way to the Mississippi River. Not cool enough for trout, but too cool to be ideal for the warm water fish. Flood reduction. Loss of fish spawning habitat at the time of the year that they would normally get spring floods. Our farmers are planting those fields and the lakes are getting high, holding the water back. Irrigation, there's irrigation projects on the river sucking water to irrigate farms, whereas the navigation folks want lots of water in the river. Exotic species. Some of them are things we want. Brown trout spawn in the Ozarks, so we can call them established. Other trout, we got to stock all of them. Common carp, we didn't intentionally put them there, but they're out there maintaining themselves quite well. Other species we didn't want here. The Chinese carp. If you boat her down the White River now, the lower White, you need to be careful. 20-pound silver carp jumping up may hit you right in the face. It's happened to a lot of folks. had broken jaws from fish jumping in the boat. I've had fish jump, when I lived in Brinkley, I had silver carp jump in my boat when I was checking fish kill on biometer. Zebra mussels, devastating our mussel populations. And what is the effect of all these changes? Well, let's go to the mussel industry. In 1912, almost 10,000 tons. The mussel industry popped back up in the late mid 80s and 90s, and I monitored it. And the White River Basin produced about 860 tons. That's less than a tenth of what it produced in 1912. These mussels now were for the Japanese cultured pearl industry instead of buttons. There was only one button plant left in the U.S. It was Sikeston, Missouri, back in the late 80s. It's all for the cultured pearl, and then they had some disease problems and other sources, and this industry totally collapsed. But the White River was no longer important to the mussel industry. And cold water and navigation dredging took care of it. The Black, with no dams and no navigation, did maintain its mussel populations. Commercial fishing, the same. Instead of 20,000 tons in a 20-month period, 974 tons the last time we monitored commercial fishing industry. One good thing we got going in the White River, the Lower White, is paddlefish and sturgeon. We are the main producer of caviar in the nation. And with commercial fisherman catches a big paddlefish, it can get $100 a pound for unprocessed roe. Big dollar for them.
That's something nobody knows, I bet. I've never heard that. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
caviar, paddlefish caviar is as good as beluga sturgeon.
That's cool.
And all these changes, I mentioned earlier, the fish and one or two mussels are extinct throughout the range. We have a bunch of fish on the endangered species list. Some of them are because of limited distribution. The ghost cavefish, found in Alexander Cave down about Fountain View. Only place in the world it's found. Ozark cavefish is more common in the Arkansas drainage over Fayetteville area, but it's threatened. It's underground, quite a few different caves, but some of these are very limited ranges and are affected by man's activities to make it even worse. Perfect example. We talk about clean hydropower. You cannot point to a nuclear power plant, a coal power plant, an automobile that wiped the species off the face of the earth. Coal and petroleum are wiping a lot off, but not in any individual project. There is a lot of dams have wiped out species completely from the earth. Good example, best one we got locally, the yellow-cheeked darter. This was the most common darter in the Little Red River system. 90% of its habitat was buried by Greers Ferry Reservoir. It still persists in a few streams above Greers Ferry, but even there it's no longer the most common darter. It just doesn't have any downstream refuge anymore. 100 years from now, this species is going to be one of them that was wiped off the earth by a dam. Other endangered species, we've got a bunch of mussels. Mussels are our most endangered wildlife in the nation. The turgid blossom was in the last few months finally declared extinct by the Fish and Wildlife Service. The Curtis pearly mussel was last collected 2 ancient adults and adult males from the Little Black River up by Poplar Bluff in 1992. Has not been collected since. It's probably extinct, but has not been declared extinct yet. Hell Creek cave crayfish is kind of interesting. It's found in one cave down around Mountain View, only place in the world. Well, my last year of Game and Fish, little kid over in Yellville got an albino crawdad. Got it to us. Got it to Fish and Wildlife Service. It was a Hell Creek cave crayfish. There's some connection between Mountain View and Yellville that we don't know about, but it's more widespread than we knew anyway. Cave down at near Batesville, Fouché Cave has its own snail. Tumbleweed Creek, cave right on the banks, almost on the banks of Bull Shoals River up at Peel in Missouri. Has a cave snail that's found nowhere else in the world. A lot of you've probably seen pictures of the Ozark hellbender. Its adult population now is about 600. I have collected them in the Norfolk River above with the Missouri Department, above Norfolk Lake, up at Dock Mill. Is it Howey Spring is on the Norfolk? I can't remember what the stream is, but I've collected Ozark hellbender with them. That population is gone now. The fungus is wiping out amphibians worldwide is getting them. Now, the good news is the St. Louis Zoo is producing them, stocking them back into their natural habitats. Maybe we can turn things around. We'll see. Well, what's the result? The Ozarks, all these changes that destroyed the White River, great economy. The Ozarks came out like smelling like a rose. All that fantastic farmland down in the Delta. Modern agriculture does not need employees. It needs an owner with a big, expensive combine. It does not need employees. Population in the Delta is collapsing. When Hernando de Soto was the first European to get to Arkansas, the Arkansas Delta had more people in it than it does today. He camped at several months at Parkin. From the top of Parkin was a city of 15,000 at the time, and he could see a dozen more cities, smoke from a dozen more cities from the top of the hill where he put his cross. Poverty rate in the Delta is high. Some counties up to a quarter of the population. When I moved to Brinkley, it had a population of 5,600. Last census, it was 3,200. When I moved there, it had a Walmart. It had a hospital. It had a Kroger grocery store. It has none of those now. This is a picture from Elaine, which is kind of on a high ridge right between the Mississippi and White River Basins. You may have heard of it as the site of the worst race riot in U.S. history. Killed as many as Tulsa, except that Elaine was a population of 1,000 people instead of 50,000 people. This is the housing that was still being used when I lived there, when I left in '92. These houses are, well, I lived 2 years in South America. If you put Elaine in Bogota, they'd have to move it across the tracks. It is that bad. But there's good things in the Delta too. Flood control. Down there, along the White River, the levee is set back from the river. I'll show you a comparison. On the right, we have the Mississippi River. The levee right next to the river, the bank stabilized with rock. It doesn't whip back and forth across this watershed, across its floodplain like the White still can. When all the old river lakes along the Mississippi, like Tunica and Horseshoe, Old Town, when they fill in, like all lakes do, they're gone, never to be replaced. White River Refuge, which is this picture, has 300 old river lakes. 200 years from now, not a one of them will still be there. But there will still be 300 old river lakes. Another thing that has happened in the Delta is the American hunter has really came through. When they came up with the duck stamp in 1935, one of the very first purchases was the White River Refuge, which is now at 160,000 acres. When the farmers and the Corps of Engineers wanted to complete the channelization in the Delta, by channelizing the Cache River and Bayou de View with its virgin 1,000-year-old cypress swamp, the duck hunters threw a fit. Their duck hunters arranged for the East Arkansas Wildlife Association, which was the kind of combination that I don't see happening anymore. They've got Sierra Club and Audubon Society, along with National Wildlife Federation, Ducks Unlimited, National Rifle Association, all as a group. Republican and Democrat Congress people, governor, all opposed the ditch. Instead, what we got out of it was Cache River National Wildlife Refuge. All that land they bought for the right of way to dig the ditch right down through the middle of the Dagmar Swamp, all that land is now part of the Cache River National Wildlife Refuge. The Arkansas Game and Fish has come through too. We've purchased on over 112,000 acres now. Wildlife management areas all up and down the White River. These are paid for by your hunting license and the federal tax on firearms and ammunition. I hear a lot of folks, why do you allow hunting on wildlife refuges? Look at who bought them. Well, what's the future of the White River? Well, development's going to continue on our lakes and streams. You can't get around that. Hopefully we can keep it under somewhat control with regulations. But it's going to be here and we just have to live with it. The Grand Prairie Irrigation Project that's sucking is either almost complete or complete. It's real close to complete. Sucking water out of the White River to grow rice in the Grand Prairie of East Arkansas. Navigation channel plans, they want to widen the navigation channel. Well, the irrigation is getting rid of the water. Navigation channel, those folks want more water. So we've formed a White River comprehensive plan to try to figure out just what to do. Montgomery Point Lock and Dam has been built at the confluence of the White and the Mississippi. But thanks to letters written, some, at least one by me, they changed the plan. Instead of a lock and dam that blocks the White River, cutting off paddlefish, sturgeon migration, blue catfish migrations, now if the river is high, they laid the dam down on the bottom of the river. So you can boat over it, fish can swim over it. It's only used when the river is too low for navigation and they need to hold the water up. There's more refuge purchases planned. But probably more acreage is being reforested on private lands through conservation easements with the Nature Conservancy, Natural Resource Conservation Service with the feds. We're doing a lot of stream restoration projects. You'll see them up and down the White River trying to cut down some of the sedimentation. correcting stuff that should never been done in the first place. We are restarting Alligator Garden. There's enough down there that they're actually going out conducting samples now. In my 12 years in Brinkley, I saw one. My entire, and even talking about stocking infected drum and channel catfish in the Buffalo River to bring back the mussels that disappeared. Did I mention? I didn't mention that when I went through the mussels. Okay, you think the Buffalo River being largely forested or in pasture, not much towns, wouldn't be affected too much by man. White River only backs up maybe a mile or so when it's high, so most of the river is not affected by White River. But it is. When Real Bull Shoals Dam turned the river cold, the channel catfish and drum left. The black sand shell requires channel catfish as its larval host. The drum uses the larval host of the bluefin. That's the shell that they use for Navajo jewelry, the purple mother of pearl. Those species are gone. Those mussel species are gone from the Buffalo River, even though they were never harvested. Nothing that never poisoned. The habitat is still just fine for them, but they're gone because their fish hosts, which migrated up from the White River, are gone. May someday stock infected channel catfish and drum. I'm not working anymore, so I'm not privy to all the discussions. I know that it has been discussed. Do we have any questions?
Not a question, but you're talking about conservation. One of the things that several groups around here now are doing is trying to get people to be a little smarter in the way they take care of their land on the White River to where they, all these rocks you see.
Well, you see everybody cuts down the trees so they can see the river, and then they come to the game and fish to keep the bank from getting to their house.
You got it. You got it.
Well, we
I think
prioritize.
it's kind of
If it's
funny,
a line,
Ken.
if it's somebody that bought the house and didn't do the work, they're gonna have, and there's a limited amount of money and personnel to do the work. The folks that didn't cause the problem are going to be higher on the list than the ones that did.
Do you see, I guess you were out before all this occurred, really, the snakeheads, silvers, and big heads, do they come
The
up?
silvers are at least up to Batesville.
Mhm.
Snakeheads, probably, they're all over the Delta now. We did a big project trying to get rid of them. It was probably in 2008. We tried to get rid of them in 2007, and Hurricane Rita hit and flooded the area that the snakeheads were found next to the fish hatchery. They tried to produce them and got told, no, you can't. When they put them out on the ground to kill them, you can't kill a snakehead that way. He can breathe air. All he can do is wander till he gets to the creek. So they didn't kill him. They got in the river. Now, I don't think they're going to be the problem with the silver carp jumping, knocking you out of the boat. For one thing, they're easy to catch, and they're good eating. They're better eating than the bowfin that they would likely replace.
On the Illinois, we had upwards of 6,000 pounds per acre in silvers.
The silvers and big heads, they're a bunch down there in the
Of
Delta.
course, the ones everybody's worried about are the black. So,
It's out there. I haven't seen big numbers of it yet, but that would devastate the mussel populations. Go ahead.
Tell me about what a snakehead is. Is it a snakehead fish?
Yes,
Is it-
it's a Chinese fish. It was imported by an Arkansas fish farmer because it's real popular with the Chinese. And he was going to sell them to Chinese restaurants. They were illegal to have. He was told to get rid of them. So he put them out on his levee to kill them.
They didn't die.
And they're like walking catfish. They can walk.
I got one question. How about the zebra mussels now? We know they're some of the lakes like
Bull Shoals has zebra mussels. Yeah.
How about below the dam, Tailwater below the dam? Do you
I
think the
don't-
water's too
haven't-
cold for them?
I don't know that it's too cold for them, but I haven't heard of them showing up.
I was just hoping
Yeah,
they.
hope they don't, but, I would expect that they do. I know that they're in the lower White, where they would be competing with mussels. What those zebra mussels do, they'll get on the mussel, use that as habitat, and suck up all the oxygen that the mussel would be sucking out of the environment.
Ken, have the powers that be gotten any smarter? You know, when they built Bull Shoals, somehow they didn't realize taking water off the bottom of a lake was gonna make it a cold water fishery.
Yeah.
Is that
I don't know if
changed?
that's changed. There's not many new dams. There's so many problems with dams that they're not building many new ones in the U.S. But I imagine they would still be sucking off the bottom.
It
Easier
still blows my
engineering.
mind that somebody didn't think of that. They had this premier smallmouth bass place, and next thing they know, they're out of business, and they have to build hatcheries to stock trout in there so they can have fish. So anyway, I live on the White River and I love trout, but it's just kind of interesting that happened.